Good afternoon, and thanks again for joining us today. Again, we have Premier Scott Moe and Dr. Saqib Shahab in the Legislative Building in Regina. We have Scott Livingstone, CEO of the Saskatchewan Health Authority, joining us on the line until 3 o'clock. Premier Moe and Dr. Shahab have some opening comments, followed by time for questions. Premier?
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, and we appreciate you joining us today. We have some very positive case numbers to report today as well. 0 new cases, 14 new recoveries. The number of known active cases in Saskatchewan has been steadily declining for more than 3 weeks now, and is now down to 33 active cases, the lowest level since March the 20th. This is particularly encouraging as we are now 2 weeks into Phase 2 of the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, and less than 1 week away from the start of Phase 3 on Monday, June the 8th, next Monday. It shows that we can, in Saskatchewan, reopen businesses and people can safely return to work while continuing to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The number of active cases in the far north continues to steadily decline as well. As of today, there are just 23 active cases in the far north, down from a peak of 156 on May the 10th. And this is due to much thanks to the tremendous efforts of community leaders, of healthcare workers, of public safety officers, volunteers, and residents of the northwestern portion of our province of Saskatchewan. Each and every one of them are doing their part to control the spread of COVID-19, and for that I say thank you. As a result, I'm pleased to announce that travel restrictions to and from the Loche and other communities in the northwest portion of Saskatchewan will be removed effective this Monday, June the 8th. The Loche will also move into phases 1 and 2 of the Reopen Saskatchewan plan on the same day, June the 8th. This is good news, but everyone in that part of the province must, like the rest of us, remain vigilant and continue to follow all of the physical distancing measures that have worked so well over the past few weeks. That goes for each and every one of us. As we open up more things up, everyone has a personal responsibility to maintain good practices to keep yourself as well as those around you safe. Last week I talked about the hardship that COVID-19 has caused for our seniors in long-term care facilities and their families who are not able to visit them. These measures, together with the great work of all of the staff in those facilities, have kept our seniors safe, and for that we are grateful. Thankfully, Saskatchewan has not suffered the devastating number of outbreaks that we have seen in all too many seniors' homes in other provinces in Canada. So these measures are working. But at the same time, we understand how lonely and heartbreaking it must be for our seniors who have been isolated from their family and their friends for a number of weeks now. The Saskatchewan Health Authority has been working to develop new guidelines to safely increase visits to long-term care homes, and they will be outlining those guidelines tomorrow. I would also like to take a moment to address the events that occurred today outside of this Legislative Assembly. These events were in response to other recent events throughout North America. And today we saw two very different kinds of expression. We saw a peaceful demonstration in support of tolerance, against racial injustice, and to make the clear statement that Black Lives Matter. Like so many others, I have been deeply disturbed by recent events that we have observed in the U.S. And I was disturbed and horrified by the brutal and senseless killing of George Floyd. It's disturbing to see the use of tear gas and rubber bullets against peaceful protesters. And it's disturbing to see some of these protests used as a pretense for violence, for vandalism, and for looting. Racism remains a problem in our society and in our communities, and we should take every opportunity to speak out against it. We should do so peacefully, and we should do so lawfully. Unlike the individual who chose to vandalize the war memorial at the legislature. I'm heartened by the fact that that disgraceful act was done quite likely by one individual. Meanwhile, we had hundreds at the peaceful demonstration in front of the legislature today. So I commend those in the U.S. and Canada, as well as here in Saskatchewan, who are making their voice heard and are doing so peacefully and safely. So with that, I would ask Dr. Shahab to make a few comments.
Thank you, Premier. So I'll just go over some of the numbers again. So again, our condolences, because over the weekend we had our 11th deaths in Saskatchewan, and that brings our total deaths to 11, out of which 4 were in the 80 plus age group, 6 in the 60 to 69 age group, and 1 in the 40 to 59 age group. So again, a reminder that while we have no new cases today and only 33 active cases, unfortunately, COVID does impact those who are older and have underlying risk factors to a disproportionate extent. Um, in terms of the Northwest, as the Premier mentioned, the public health order will be lifted on June 8th, allowing travel to and from the Northwest and between communities. Gathering sizes are going to be a bit different. From June 8th, there'll be 15 indoors, 30 outdoors, but for the Northwest, there'll be 10 indoors and 20 outdoors. And again, maintaining that physical distancing. I think as we reopen and re-engage in outdoor recreational activities, economic activities, retail activities, gatherings we have to just be very mindful of, because that is where transmission happens. So while we can meet in a virtual household, that can go up now from next week from 2 to 3 households to maybe 3 to 4, up to 15 people instead of two to 3 friends, maybe 4 to 5 friends. We just need to be mindful that if we have lots of different gatherings all the time, that's how transmission happens, and within days to weeks you can go from no case to dozens or hundreds. So that's just something we need to keep in the back of our mind as we move forward, and try to enjoy the summer, participate in economic activity and reopening of Saskatchewan, and from next week, enjoy eating out at a restaurant or going to the gym, but just avoiding those multiple gatherings where transmission takes off very quickly. An occasional gathering done properly with physical distancing, some thought about how food should be served is a good idea, but lots of gatherings which aren't well organized is not a good idea. I also wanted to say that it's really important for all of us to become familiar with the guidelines on the Reopen Saskatchewan plan. So if you go to the website, there's the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, and if you click on the plan itself, it has many headings on different places that we may choose to visit, like restaurants and gyms. And even if you're not a business owner, it's a good idea to become familiar with the protocols, because if you're familiar with the protocols going in, it makes it easier for the business owner to comply with the protocols, and it makes the experience safe and pleasant for everyone. So I think those guidelines are quite detailed. We hear from some people that they're too strict, from some that they're too not stringent enough. I think these are the best that we have been able to produce, and we've looked at many other jurisdictions, both nationally and internationally, and we're willing to receive feedback and, of course, see if there is evidence of transmission, which occasionally will happen, and we just need to be aware that occasionally transmission will happen in any of these sectors, and we'll just manage that. But it's just something that we just need to become familiar with these guidelines, and then try to comply as much as we can with these guidelines or any additional directions business owners may want to give us, just to make the experience smooth and pleasant for all concerned. So with that, I will probably stop.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Premier. We'll take our first question from the phone line. Operator.
We have Adam Hunter with CBC.
Hi, Mr. Premier. I'm wondering if there was a decision made to not attend by yourself today to the protests, and why you weren't there in person.
Oh, I was making my way from home actually to Regina this morning with a small time in for some meetings in Saskatoon.
You have a follow-up, Adam?
I was going to ask if there's another similar rally, would you be interested in speaking and addressing the crowd as the Speaker and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition did today?
Yeah, I haven't given that any thought. I guess I would consider it. I haven't given it any thought. With respect to what occurred with the rally outside here today, I would just say this, that I fully understand the reasons as the reasons these individuals are coming together. I think they have the support of virtually everyone, including myself, in addressing what is a societal challenge, not just in Saskatchewan, but a societal challenge across Canada, across North America, for sure. And we see these voices that are being heard, and I just have all the respect in the world for them as individuals, for communicating the message that racism is not all right, and Black lives do matter. And so, there was a rally out here today. I'm sure I'll have some additional questions on the size of that rally, but it was a peaceful rally, and it was one that I think has brought people together to raise the discussion yet again of a societal challenge that we all face.
We'll take our next question from the room. Steph?
Yeah. What do you make, as you said, what do you make of the size of the rally? About more than 500 people there, not everyone wearing masks, certainly not everyone physical distancing. And do you have any recommendations, Dr. Shahab, for what they should do now?
So the recommendation is 10, and from what I understand, there was more than 10 that were in front of the legislature today. I also understand why they came together today. There is a societal challenge that we have to address. We have to continue to address. It's here in Saskatchewan. It's in our communities. Racism is present here, and we need to work very hard as individuals. The same personal responsibility that we have with our physical distancing and everything else that we're doing to control the spread of this virus is also true. We have the same personal responsibility in treating people as our equals, regardless of whether they're male, female, the color of their skin, the origin of where their ancestors come from. We are all here together. And so with respect to the enforcement or the size of the rally, my assumption is that the law enforcement officials have used their judgment with respect to this particular rally on the broader societal challenge that we have, and I can do nothing but support the law enforcement officials with that judgment. Anything to add, Doctor?
Yeah, I'll just say that obviously this was a specific event, and obviously, like the Premier said, we should all stand against any injustice in our home communities, country, or North America, or globally, in a peaceful way. And there's lots of ways of demonstrating, either in person or through other means. But I think whatever we do, either at an event like this or during the summer when there's other opportunities to celebrate or grieve, I think we all need to be conscious of our responsibility to each other in terms of, we have learned that, even when you're outdoors, we see around Wascana Lake, people are walking, hundreds of people are walking safely, keeping the physical distance. And I think just practicing those measures of physical distancing kind of helps all of us to stay safe. And also, I would remind people who were at the rally and were maybe closer than 2 meters and weren't wearing a mask, just keep an eye on their symptoms and do seek testing if they are concerned. I think testing is easily available. But generally, I think summer is a time when people are out and about, and there's lots of opportunities to think about getting together, and a gathering size is also going up. But just be conscious of some of the fairly simple steps that we can do to keep all of us safe.
Follow up, Steph?
Yeah, to the Premier, what does it say about your government's priorities that it has kind of shelved bringing in an independent civilian-led police oversight body because of COVID-19, but it's moving ahead with some other priorities, despite the fact that this has been something people in Saskatchewan have called out for years for police to stop kind of policing themselves. So what message does that send, and when, if ever, can Saskatchewan expect to get this independent watchdog?
I'm not certain that it's been shelved, if you will. There's been a number of priorities that have maybe things in government have been reprioritized to some degree with our addressing of the COVID pandemic and how we are, serving the people that we serve during this, what is a very challenging and very different time, I think, in fairness. The independent civilian oversight of our police force is not something that is, I would say, being shelved. It's something that is actively continued to be looked at by our Attorney General, and it's something that I think we need to move on in this province in the very near future. And so the Attorney General, Minister Morgan, continues to work on that, and I'm not sure of a timeline. I can't give a timeline today on when we would move on some type of a framework. but I believe there are a number of frameworks across this nation that we can look to for guidance on what has worked and worked well, and move here in the province as soon as we are able.
We'll take our next question from the phone line.
We have Murray Mandrick with the Leader Post.
Good afternoon, Premier. Just a follow-up to Steph's and Adam's question. What role as Premier do you see you playing in leadership when it comes to to rallies like this and sending a strong message? It was about a year ago when there was controversy over attending the LGBTQ parade and such, and you decided that you need to send a strong message by being there. Do you not see a similar role in right now in terms of being there?
So I've been following rallies like this across North America for a number of days now. Like, I think, in fairness, everyone has been. I was not aware of the size and what was going to happen here in Regina today, although I do understand exactly and precisely why so many people did feel compelled. The role that we have is, whether we're elected leaders, leaders in our community, leaders in our family, leaders in our smaller segments of our community, is that racism has no place here. This is not the community in the province that we know and love. We need to continue to treat those that we work with, those that we live beside, those that we go to school with, those that we meet each and every day, with precisely the same care, love, and respect that we expect to be treated with in return. That is this is the exactly the same personal responsibility that each and every one of us has as human beings, is to treat one another with the honesty and the respect that we expect in return. So as a leader, there's no place for racism in this province, and we will continue to work with whomever we can to get that message out and to reaffirm to people. We've had our challenges here over the course of not even just the last few decades, but the last few years, and we'll continue to work with all of the people of this province to ensure that it's a better place as we take each step at a time.
Follow up, Murray?
Are you worried about the message you send by not attending, either inadvertently or otherwise, when you go to a rally for the pipelines or oil and gas? It's obviously expected from supporters, but when you don't go to these things, that's the only events they see you attending in front of a large crowd?
Yeah, I suppose my entire itinerary over the course of a year could be dissected as well. What does need to I think be communicated is the fact that these voices that we heard today, these individuals and collectively as a group, their voices matter. They matter not only with the rally that we see here in Regina, but the rallies that we see across Canada, across North America. They are a reaction to a very tragic event that we all witnessed, unfortunately. But they raise a much broader societal challenge that we need to address. We need to address it as leaders. Racism has no place here. I would repeat that again, and most certainly in this province, we need to continue to work together to do better, and we're committed to doing just that.
We'll take our next question from the phone line.
We have Matt Young with CTV.
Oh, hello. I have a question regarding the number of active cases. As the Premier mentioned, they have been dropping. We're now down to 33 active cases in Saskatchewan. I guess obviously I expect that you guys would be monitoring that, but as the number of active cases in Saskatchewan dwindles closer and closer, I want to say, to zero, or at least to a minimal amount of cases, is the province getting closer and closer to putting a date on phase 4 of the reopen plan?
Working actively on phase 4 with those that are involved, obviously in phase 4, as well as looking at working with a number of groups on refining and finalizing some of the business entities that are already working. As we saw just recently, we had worship services, regulations around worship services come out, and we continue to work with communities of all faiths so that we can have the opportunity to worship, but as well ensure that there are parameters in place so that it can happen safely. So we are actively looking at phase 4, what phase 4 does look like as we start to not only set a date, but set some of the parameters that these entities and communities, part of it is reopening the economy, part of it is reopening extracurricular recreation opportunities in our community as well. And so we're actively looking at that, and you may hear more about it in the very, very near future. Dr. Schwab, anything to add to that on some of the work you're doing?
Yeah, so I think we'll be providing more details over the next week about phase 4, and there's some areas that are easier. They are mostly outdoor recreational activities and are more seasonal that we'll be announcing earlier as phase 4.1, and those are and ideally we like 2 to 3 weeks in between phases, so that gives a kind of a date of maybe towards end June, early July for some activities in phase 4, which will be more of phase 4.1, and then some additional areas that may be later, which need more thought in terms of how the processes will work. And also, I think we're also trying to align with other provinces that have similar areas of activity that either have reopened or are reopening, and learning from their experience as well. But I think we have to recognize that we are doing extremely well in Saskatchewan. We need to stay the course even as we reopen, and we need to just remember that small gatherings where we don't observe physical distancing, and even if there's food being served, there's certain procedures about plating the food out and so forth. Just those simple steps can prevent, multiple chains of transmission that will allow us actually to move forward to phase 4, 4.1 initially, and then 4.2 in a more streamlined way. But we all need to do our part to allow all of us to move forward in that way.
Follow up, Matt?
Yes, I want to ask a bit about testing. I know that testing guidelines have been expanded recently, but Saskatchewan continues, at least according to the province's update here, their per capita rate of testing continues to be below the national rate. In that context, one, why is that? And two, in that context, do you think the province is prepared for a possible second wave if it comes?
So I think we're looking at 3 indicators very closely. So obviously we have our total number of cases, but like was mentioned, we're looking very closely at the active cases. Another way of looking at that is cases in the last 2 weeks. So that's one indicator. But then of course we don't just look at that, because if there's a part of the province where there's no testing happening, the fact that there's no active cases doesn't lend you too much confidence. So we also are looking at testing overall, but testing throughout the province. And if we see that the testing is lagging, yeah, I think we do need to communicate the fact that testing is available either provincially or in a part of the province where testing rates are falling. And then we are also looking very closely at test positivity rate. Historically, our positive rate has been around, less than 3%. It was a bit higher in the north, but even that is now falling. So our test positive rate is under 3%, and that's something you need to keep an eye on. Is enough testing happening to keep us reassured that our case numbers are truly what they are, which is very low? And is the test positive rate also low, which again provides reassurance that more people are being tested than possibly may have COVID-19. So we'll be looking at all those 3 indicators at a provincial and sub-provincial level, and monitoring that as we reopen.
We'll take your next question from the phone line.
We have Adriana Christensen with CGME.
Hi there. Yes, this is in relation to the active number of cases. When people see such low numbers down to 33, and they see sometimes 0 cases in certain regions, but then every few days they might see 1 case pop up in a region that hadn't had any cases before. How do you explain to people how that happens when they might be looking at this and saying, well, we have no active cases here. So how do you explain when there is an active case that comes up?
Yeah, I think that's really important point. And so, we've been asked in the past that why don't you name the community in which there's a single case? And the reason is, one, of course, when a case happens and it's a small community, there's some privacy concerns. But the fact that we have no international travel, we have very little interprovincial travel, and cases pop up all over the place is because we have to recognize that while our case numbers are very low, we do have low levels of COVID transmission ongoing throughout the province. It's very low, but we know that 30 to 40% of COVID can be asymptomatic or symptoms that are so mild that one wouldn't even think twice about them. So that's why we really want to encourage testing. If you have any concerns, if you're out and about and have any of the broad list of symptoms, or even if you think you should get tested because you're in a situation where you felt you could have been exposed. So that's number one point. And the second is that's exactly the reason why, as we reopen our recreational activities, our business activities, and are out and about, this is the reason why we need to continue those simple but very effective measures about physical distancing, hand hygiene, and if you're closer than 2 meters, for example, when we will now access many of the personal services that are going to be opening on June 8th, those simple precautions around appropriate PPE use as and when required, because that will ensure that our numbers remain low. And my final comment would be that we have already seen through numerous clusters that if we're not careful, especially around some of that discipline around small gatherings and how we interact, we can quickly go into dozens or hundreds of cases very quickly. So I think those are some key things that we just need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Follow up, Adriana?
I guess, yes, this is to clarify. You mentioned seasonal outdoor recreational opportunities in phase 4. I guess on that note, are you suggesting that we might be able to see some things like kids sports or swimming or something like, or even beaches by the middle of summer?
Yes, so those are all things that obviously there's a lot of interest. They, in our short and sweet summer, they provide a lot of pleasure. So I think we're looking very closely over the next 2 to 3 weeks about how we can provide some basic guidance to make those activities enjoyable and doable over the summer. And then, of course, other aspects of phase 4 we'll be looking at as well at a later date.
We'll take our next question from the phone line.
We have Kayleen Sawatsky with Global.
Yeah, hi, Premier. What needs to be done what needs to be seen, I guess, up in the Northwest region in order to have those communities join in entering phase 3 of the reopen plan?
Well, I think more of what we are seeing to date, we have come from, I believe, a high of active cases in the region of over 150 down to a low of now under 30. So what was happening in not only the community of Loche, but other communities such as Beauval, Isla Crosse, Pachinak is working. People are taking this seriously, and it is driving our active cases down. So we will be reopening, barring a turn in the road, if you will. We will be looking to reopen not only the travel restrictions, but also phase 1 and phase 2 of the Reopen Saskatchewan plan in the community of Loche, where we had put it on pause as we found our way through this outbreak there. So credit goes to the community leaders, the healthcare professionals that have been in and do live in the community, as well as each and every individual in Loche that is doing the right thing to curb the spread of the virus. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that, local medical health officers and local leaders will be giving some, specific directions for the Northwest to make sure that case numbers remain low as they come out of their outbreak and are able to now, will be able to start phase 1 and 2 next week for some communities and phase 3, over 2 to 3 weeks. And that really relates to the reason transmission happens is when you are closer than 2 meters and there's a lot of social mixing. So some caution around even small gatherings where, stick to your household or your virtual household, but lots of people meeting lots of other people on a daily basis is this kind of social mixing that's problematic. Lots of ride sharing. I mean, certainly try to travel within a vehicle within your own household. If you have to ride share, do it within your virtual household. But random ride sharing, I think those are also environments where you can have transmission within a vehicle. So I think some of that direction will be really important in the coming weeks to make sure that we don't re-enter into an outbreak situation anywhere in Saskatchewan, but also especially in the far north, in the Northwest, where they have really done really well, but they need to just follow some of those specific advice to prevent re-emergence of an outbreak.
Follow up, Kayleen?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up a little bit more on the previous questions about phase four. Premier, I know you mentioned what it will entail, but considering that 2 to 3 week gap that we've seen and that was mentioned, can we anticipate to enter phase four by late June or early July?
Uh, That would be hopeful. Those discussions are occurring as we speak as to what type of a date we could look for phase four, and ultimately what would be included with that date, and how we could work with those individual sectors of either the economy or our community on ensuring that not only are they opening, but they're doing so safely. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think phase four, as we get broader and broader into sectors, some of it may get separated out or staggered. It may not be everything in one date. Some of the outdoor activities may start earlier, like end of June, early July, and some of the other sectors may start as long as things remain quite stable, a bit later. So
We'll take our next question on the phone line.
We have Dan Jones with MBC.
Hey, good afternoon, Premier. I just want to go back to that phase three in the Northwest, given that most communities are in phase one and two. Was there any discussion with local leadership about maybe isolating certain communities away from phase three?
There's been some discussion around the Reopen Saskatchewan plan and bringing in phases 1 and 2 on June the 8th throughout. We've always indicated that that is our intent, is to remove these restrictions when we're able. My understanding is the minister has been in further discussion with northern leaders as well as mayors of individual communities in the Northwest recently.
Follow up, Dan?
Yeah, can you just elaborate on some of those discussions? Because it seems kind of odd that most of those communities that are in phase one and two are there for a reason, but are not being allowed to be into phase three. So I'm just trying to get some clarification on that decision making there.
Phase 3 will be going there.
Yeah, some of the specific communities will start phase 1 and 2, but not phase 3. But some communities in the Northwest will be able to enter phase 3. And again, we need to be mindful that not all communities have all this, may have all the services that phase 3 allows. So, but it's just something that there'll be greater detail coming over the next few days, not just from us, but from the local community leaders themselves about what's different in each community based on where they're at. There's a couple of communities that are still coming out of a very sustained outbreak within the community, but then the Northwest was really, because of interdependencies, had some travel restrictions and other things. So communities that didn't themselves have an outbreak will be entering into phase 3 earlier. And of course, the travel restrictions will ease off throughout the Northwest, but in some specific communities, some of the limits on gathering size, some of the cautions will remain till they also enter phase 3 a bit later. But we'll make sure that those details are made available so that it's easy for people in the Northwest to figure out what's open and what's not.
And the goal is to open as it is safe to do so.
We'll take our next question on the phone line.
We have Phil Tank with the Star Phoenix.
Yes, I'm curious about the outdoor gathering rules, like why those are changing in Loche, how you came up with the 20-person for outdoor gatherings and staying at 10. I realize that the other gathering increases are linked to phase 3, but I'm just wondering why that's a little bit different.
So this is on the recommendation of the local medical health officers. We have been consulting with them frequently. They have been in touch with local community leadership. And so this just allows a more gradual moving forward. As you know, initially when we had gone to when we had first made the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, our limits on both indoor and outdoor gatherings in phase 3 was 15. But since we were doing so well for the rest of Saskatchewan, we felt confident enough to say that for everywhere else, indoor will go from 10 to 15, outdoor will actually go to 30. So I think we've really moved ahead for the rest of Saskatchewan for outdoor gatherings. But in the Northwest, in specific communities, I think the local medical health officers really felt that, along with local leadership, that we need to just be cautious there as phase 1 and 2 reopens, that gathering size indoor will remain at 10, outdoor can go to 20. But again, just because it's 20, having a well-organized outdoor event for 20 people, up to 20 people is one thing. having random mixing in groups of 10, 15, 20, that's haphazard, there's no thought about what's being shared, is a recipe for having an outbreak again. So I think even when we talk about gatherings, there needs to be some thought about how they're done.
Follow up, Phil?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on something that Dr. Shahad said last week about more detailed map. What I inferred from that was that there'd be a change to the way locations of cases are reported. I'm wondering whether that represents a shift in philosophy for the government and for the SHA.
Yeah. So we are going to be finalizing either this week or early next week a static map. So as you know, when you go to the website, there's a lot of dynamic information that's updated every day that shows active cases, hospitalizations, other data by far north, central, south, Regina and Saskatoon. But there'll be a static map that will have more geographical details, maybe 13 to 15 sub-provincial areas that will initially be based on 3 indicators, which I mentioned earlier, cases in the last 2 weeks. So here we're not worried about cumulative cases. We're not worried about the long history. We are interested in how many new cases last 2 weeks. But it's just not cases. It's also what's the testing rate and what is the test positive rate. Now those numbers in that detail may not be in a table or in the map, but we'll have a threshold that we'll speak about, that as long as new cases are below a certain threshold, as long as testing numbers are above a certain threshold and test positive rate is below a certain threshold, that we'll specify, businesses and individuals can be rest assured that as long as they follow the guidelines, they can safely re-engage in reopening. And even if in that area there's a small cluster and outbreak, that doesn't mean things change for that phase. All it means is that cluster or outbreak in a local area, in a town or municipality or in a setting is managed. It should not impact the overall phase. But that's something we'll keep monitoring, and if things start escalating more broadly, obviously that may change, result in some specific recommendations for that particular geography, like was done for the Northwest. So that will be coming online hopefully this week or early next week, and we'll keep informing all of us about how that risk level is informed. And at this point, the risk level is good to go into phase 3 throughout Saskatchewan, with just a bit of caution around entering phase 3 for some parts of Northwest. But otherwise, things are looking. But we did want to provide that more geographical granularity just to make sure that everyone felt comfortable, because some of the zones that we have been using are huge, and this will provide a bit more granular detail, and we'll be obviously monitoring if that's meeting everyone's needs as well.
And we'll take our last question from the room. Staff?
Yeah, to the Premier. When you can't even provide a time frame for when a new policing oversight model is coming in, why should people take your government seriously, that it is even serious about doing this? So when are you going to do it?
We will do it when it is ready. The Attorney General is committed to looking at this. He's working his way through that now. I just don't have a date here today. I didn't talk to him before I came in this morning, but rest assured I will be this week. I might be able to follow up if he has a date specific, but to my knowledge, to date, his commitment has been that he is going to look at this. Other provinces have done it, and that he is going to move on it.
Yeah, is there going to be money in the budget for this? Because I assume it would also come with some kind of extra cost.
I don't know the answer to that question right now. I would have to find the answer, and I can provide you with that. Yeah, it wouldn't be a large amount, I don't think, relative to the size of the budget. But if his intent is to move on it this year, I presume that the funds would be in place to do so.
Thanks very much for joining us today. That concludes our time. Just a note for those on the line, the Saskatchewan Health Authority will be holding their weekly update tomorrow at 11 o'clock a.m. And we have a scheduled update with the Premier and Dr. Shahab on Thursday at the usual time of 2:30. Thanks for joining us.